Joining us now, we have Democratic Representative from Ohio, Shontel Brown. She's a member of the House Oversight Committee and the vice-ranking member of the House Committee on Agriculture. Congressman, welcome. Let me play for you first part of an interview with House Speaker Mike Johnson. It's from this morning, in which he addresses the impacts to Medicaid in the budget bill as it goes to the Senate. Let's listen together to this.
No, and you can underscore what I'm about to tell you. There are no Medicaid cuts in the big, beautiful bill. We're not cutting Medicaid. What we're doing is strengthening the program. We're reducing fraud, waste, and abuse that is rampant in Medicaid to ensure that that program is essential for so many people, ensure that it's available for the most vulnerable.
Okay, if you look at the whole thing there, listen to the whole thing, is Speaker Johnson trying to deny the impact of huge cuts, which very much concern some of his Republican colleagues in the Senate?
I think he needs to read the bill. What we are seeing are cuts that will devastate communities. And when you talk about Medicaid and Medicare cuts, these are not just going to have impact on the end users, but they will inevitably have impact on the facilities that provide health care. We're talking about in red, blue, all the states, and especially in places where it's already difficult to access health care, rural communities. And so when he says that, he is being dishonest or he is misinformed. I'm not sure. I can't speak for the speaker, but it is very concerning that he can get on television and tell people that these cuts are not happening. I think one of the things that the Republicans have been very clever about when it comes to legislation is naming the bills, things like big, beautiful bills, and having some of the worst effects go into effect after the elections. So some of these cuts may not be felt right away, but they are absolutely there. And I want the people to be abundantly clear about that.
Okay. I know something you're focusing on is a change in the bill to work requirements for SNAP food benefits, lowering the current exemption from families with children up to age 18 to those with children under age 7 from being exempt from certain work requirements. Why are Republicans changing this, and how many families could this impact?
It's an excellent question, one that we presented during both the Agriculture Committee as well as the Rules Committee, and none of my Republican colleagues had an answer to the question. Again, I am concerned that they are not reading the legislation in which they are voting for. Admittedly, one of my colleagues were in a town hall and admitted he hadn't read that part. So it is concerning, because since when is a first grader, a second grader, or a third grader even able to fend for themselves? Essentially, what my Republican colleagues are proposing is that anyone above the age of 6 is no longer dependent on their parents. And so that their parents will have to figure out what to do with them during the summertime. That's not a concern for them. And so this is the type of legislation that Republican colleagues are putting forth. It is callous, it is cruel, it is careless, and it is definitely going to have an impact on, in my district alone, 50,000 households depend on SNAP, 50,000. And so when we're talking about 1/3 of the Black community. So when they take these funds away, they're essentially stealing from my constituents. They're taking this money away to give it to billionaires. Now, I don't know if there's a flash sale on beach houses, Botox, or private jets. I don't know what the sense of urgency is here, that they think that they need to take money from people who are veterans, who are seniors, who are children, who are people with disabilities that are relying on these services, not as a line item in a budget, but as a lifeline. I live this, Alex. I grew up, my mom was on SNAP when I was in elementary school because I had a medical condition called seizures. She was afraid to go to work. She was on public transportation. These are the type of people that they want to try to hurt. People like me, people like my mom, people like the people I go to church with. So they're just cruel. And I think the cruelty is the point.
I love that you're on this. You clearly have passion for it, and I find it to be a head scratcher. So keep on this one. Let's talk about Elon Musk, who left his special government role Friday. But is he really leaving? I mean, President Trump, Musk himself, Vice President Vance, they all said that Musk will still be around. Figures like far-right activist Laura Loomer have unprecedented access to the president. So does anything stop Musk from having the same access and influence as before?
Absolutely not. I think it'll continue to be more of the same. Listen, Musk was just one person who Donald Trump was able to essentially put the blame on for some of these bad policies that took place. But we will continue to see the work of DOGE move forward. And that is a commitment that they both have shared. So I don't think anything is going to change. The issue here is not that Musk is gone. The issue was that he was not held accountable. He was not vetted. Presidents have the ability to have these type of appointments in their administration. And so, as you pointed out, there are several other folks that will continue to move the proposed efforts around Project 2025 forward. We've seen it again in the agriculture space as they've separated the SNAP program from the Farm Bill, or at least they're attempting to. We see it as it relates to Medicaid, Medicare, and we see it with the termination of employees, federal workers who have essentially been civil servants looking to serve the constituents, not an individual administration. And so these folks have disrupted, dismantled, and destroyed some of the very fundamental things that keep our government operating effectively.
All right. Ohio Representative Shontel Brown, I will look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much.